A story of second chances, unspoken truths, and the courage to begin again. The law office smelled of old books and lemon polish, the kind of place where life's hardest decisions got made over mahogany, desks and signed documents. David Chen sat in one of the leather chairs outside Attorney Morrison's office, his hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, watching the second hand on the wall clock make its slow, relentless circles. 42 years old, and here he was, about to sign away the best thing that had ever happened to him. He ran his hand through his dark hair, still thick, though he'd noticed more gray at the temples lately. The watch on his wrist, the one Elena had given him for their 5th anniversary, caught the afternoon light. He'd thought about taking it off this morning. Somehow he couldn't bring himself to do it. The elevator chimed down the hall. David's heart lurched in his chest. He knew without looking that it would be her. Even after 8 months of separation, even after all the silences and the words they couldn't take back, he still knew the sound of her footsteps. But when Elena Reyes walked around the corner, everything David had prepared himself to say vanished from his mind. She moved slowly, one hand resting protectively on the swell of her belly, a belly that hadn't been there the last time he'd seen her. Her long dark hair fell past her shoulders, and she wore a burgundy dress that draped softly over her pregnant form. She was radiant in that way pregnant women sometimes are, glowing with life even as her dark eyes held, a mixture of nervousness and determination. David stood up so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. Elena stopped a few feet away from him, her hand still cradling her belly. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt enormous, filled with 8 months of absence and a million unasked questions. "Elena." David finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're pregnant," she finished for him, lifting her chin slightly. 8 months. The math hit David like a physical blow. 8 months pregnant. 8 months since they'd separated, which meant his eyes moved from her face to her belly and back again, his mind racing through calculations he'd already done a dozen times in the span of 5 seconds. The last night they'd spent together before she'd moved out. The terrible fight they'd had the next morning, the way she'd packed her things with tears streaming down her face, while he stood frozen, too proud and too hurt to stop her. "Is it?" He couldn't finish the question. His throat had closed up. Elena's expression softened just slightly. "Yes, David, she's yours." She a daughter. They were going to have a daughter. David sank back down into the chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him. He looked up at Elena, searching her face for answers to questions he didn't even know how to ask. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena moved carefully to the chair across from him, settling herself with the practiced caution of a woman in her 3rd trimester. She smoothed her dress over her knees, not meeting his eyes. "I tried. 3 times I called you. Twice you didn't answer. The 3rd time, you said you couldn't talk because you were in a meeting." David closed his eyes. He remembered those calls. He'd been so angry still, so hurt. He'd seen her name on his phone and let it go to voicemail out of spite. The 3rd time he had been in a meeting, but if he was honest with himself, he'd used it as an excuse. He'd told himself he wasn't ready to hear whatever she had to say. "I left voicemails," Elena continued quietly, "but they weren't the kind of thing I wanted to tell you in a message. I thought you'd call back when you were ready, when enough time had passed, but you never did." "I listened to them," David admitted, his voice rough. "About 100 times each. You just said you needed to talk. I thought you were going to ask me for something about the divorce, about dividing up our things." He looked at her belly again, still trying to process what he was seeing. "I never imagined." The door to Attorney Morrison's office opened, and a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s stepped out. Richard Morrison had handled real estate transactions for David's company for years. When David had asked him about divorce proceedings, Morrison had looked genuinely sad. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Reyes," Morrison greeted them with professional warmth, though his eyes flickered with surprise when he noticed Elena's condition. "Please come in." They stood, David quickly, Elena with more effort. Without thinking, David reached out to steady her elbow. Elena glanced at him, surprised, but didn't pull away. The brief contact sent a jolt through David's entire body. How long had it been since he'd touched her? How had he survived these months without this small, simple connection? Morrison's office was spacious and comfortable, with family photos on the credenza behind his desk, grandchildren at various ages, a golden retriever, a wife with kind eyes. David had always appreciated that about Morrison. He was a man who understood that behind every legal document were real people with real lives. They settled into the chairs facing Morrison's desk, Elena moving with careful deliberation. David noticed she was wearing the small gold cross necklace she never took off, the one her grandmother had given her. He'd always loved how it caught the light. Morrison folded his hands on top of the file in front of him and looked between them with measured consideration. "Before we proceed," he said gently, "I need to ask if circumstances have changed that might affect these proceedings." David and Elena looked at each other. "Mr. Morrison," Elena began, her voice steady despite the tremor David could hear underneath. "I apologize for not informing you sooner. I'm 8 months pregnant. The baby is David's." Morrison's expression remained neutral, professional, but something warm flickered in his eyes. "I see. And have you two discussed how this development might impact your decision to divorce?" "We haven't discussed anything," David said, finding his voice. "I just found out 2 minutes ago out in the hallway." Morrison leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. In his years of practice, he'd seen every kind of human drama play out across his desk. "Then perhaps," he said with quiet wisdom, "we should postpone today's proceedings. Give you some time to talk, to figure out what this means for both of you." "No," Elena said firmly. She turned to David, and he could see the resolve in her eyes, even as they shimmered with unshed tears. "We came here to end our marriage. David, a baby doesn't fix what was broken between us." "Elena, you remember why I left?" she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "We couldn't be in the same room without fighting. Every conversation turned into an argument about something. Your work hours, my job, whose family we'd visit for holidays, whether to have children." David flinched at that last part. Whether to have children. It had been their biggest fight, the one that had driven the final wedge between them. Elena had wanted to start a family. David had wanted to wait, to build more financial security, to be more established in his career. She'd said he was always waiting for some perfect future that would never come. He'd said she didn't understand the pressure he was under to provide, to build something lasting. Now, 8 months later, here was the child he'd been too afraid to try for, growing inside the woman he'd been too stubborn to fight for. "But things are different now," David said, hearing the desperation in his own voice. "Are they?" Elena asked softly. "Or do we just have a child, coming into the middle of the same mess we couldn't figure out before?" Morrison cleared his throat gently. "If I may offer some perspective from my years doing this work, children change everything. But Ms. Reyes is right that they don't fix what's broken. However," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "they do give us powerful reasons to try to fix things ourselves." Elena placed both hands on her belly, and David watched as something rippled across it. The baby, their daughter, moving inside her. His daughter. The reality of it kept hitting him in waves, each one stronger than the last. "Can we have a moment?" David asked Morrison. "Alone?" Morrison nodded and stood. "Take all the time you need. I'll be just outside." When the door clicked shut behind him, the silence in the room felt different, more intimate, more dangerous. David turned his chair slightly to face Elena more directly. "Tell me why you didn't tell me sooner," he said. "The real reason." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing absent patterns on her belly. "Because I was afraid," she finally whispered. "Afraid you'd think I did it on purpose. Afraid you'd come back out of obligation. Not because you wanted to. Afraid," her voice broke, "afraid you'd resent me and the baby for trapping you in a marriage you'd already decided to leave." "Elena!" David leaned forward, and without planning to, he found himself kneeling beside her chair, looking up into her face. "I never wanted to leave you. I wanted the fighting to stop. I wanted us to find our way back to each other. But I didn't know how, and I was too proud to figure it out." A tear slipped down Eleanor's cheek. "We hurt each other so much, David, with words, with silences. How do we come back from that?" "I don't know," David admitted, "but I know I want to try. I know that I've spent 8 months feeling like half of myself was missing. I know that I pick up my phone to call you at least 10 times a day, and then talk myself out of it. I know that I still sleep on my side of the bed because your side feels too empty. More tears now flowing freely down Elena's face. I wanted to hate you, she said. It would have been so much easier, but I just missed you. Every day, every moment I missed you. David reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't, he placed his hand gently on her belly. Immediately, he felt movement, a small push against his palm, as if their daughter was reaching out to him through layers of skin and time and hurt. Oh my God, he breathed. Elena covered his hand with hers. She's active, she said with a trembling smile. Especially at night. She keeps me up with her gymnastics routines. What have you been calling her? David asked, his voice thick with emotion. I haven't picked a name yet. Elena paused, fresh tears welling up. I wanted you to help choose it. Even if we weren't together, I wanted you to be part of that. But I was too afraid to ask. David looked up at her. This woman he'd loved for 7 years, married for 6, and spent the last 8 months trying and failing to get over. She was scared. He was scared. They'd made such a mess of things. But underneath all of that, underneath the fear and the hurt and the pride, there was still love. He could feel it, as surely as he could feel their daughter moving beneath his hand. I don't want to sign those papers, David said. I don't want to be your ex-husband. I want to be the man who holds your hand when our daughter is born. I want to be the one who gets up with her at night. I want us to figure out how to stop hurting each other and start healing together. What if we can't? Elena whispered. What if we just end up in the same place 6 months from now? Except with a baby who has to watch her parents tear each other apart. Then we'll get help, David said with sudden clarity. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. We'll learn how to talk to each other, how to fight fair, how to be partners instead of adversaries. He squeezed her hand gently. I was so focused on building a perfect future that I forgot to take care of the present. I forgot that you were the future I should have been fighting for all along. Elena let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. You're saying all the right things. I'm saying what I should have said 8 months ago. What I should have said a year ago when we started drifting apart. David stood, still holding her hand, and pulled a handkerchief from his pocket to gently wipe her tears. I'm not asking you to forget everything that happened. I'm asking for a chance to do better, to be better. Elena looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. David let her look, let her see everything he was feeling. The regret, the hope, the love that had never really gone away. I'm scared, David, she finally said. Me too, I'm terrified. But I'm more scared of walking out of here today and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Elena stood slowly, David immediately moving to support her. They faced each other, her belly between them, their daughter moving gently in her protected world, unaware of the momentous decision being made just beyond her reach. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay, we try. David felt relief flood through him so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. Yeah. Elena managed a real smile now, the first he'd seen from her in months. But we do this right, David. Counseling, communication, no. More letting things build up until we explode. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. David carefully pulled her into his arms, mindful of her belly, and held her close. She tucked her head under his chin, and he felt her shoulders shake as she cried, "Release!" Relief, and probably still a fair amount of fear. We're going to have a daughter, Elena said against his chest, wonder in her voice. We're going to have a daughter, David repeated, the words feeling like a prayer and a promise all at once. A soft knock on the door made them both look up. Morrison peered in cautiously. How are we doing in here? David looked at Elena, waiting for her to answer. She nodded. We're not signing today, David said. We need to put the divorce on hold. Morrison's face broke into the first genuine smile David had seen from him. I have to tell you, in 30 years of practice, that's one of my favorite sentences to hear. He moved to his desk and picked up the file. I'll file the necessary paperwork to suspend the proceedings. And might I suggest, he added with grandfatherly warmth, "that you two young people go get some dinner. Talk. Make plans. You have a lot to figure out, but something tells me you're going to be just fine." An hour later, David and Elena sat in a small Italian restaurant they used to frequent when they were dating. Red checkered, tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, the smell of garlic and basil in the air. Elena had a plate of pasta in front of her, and was eating with the focused determination of a woman eating for two. "I forgot how much you loved this place," David said, watching her with a smile. "I've been craving their fettuccine for months," Elena admitted. "But I couldn't bring myself to come here without you. Too many memories. Good memories. The best." She reached across the table and took his hand. "David, I need you to know something. Even when I was angriest at you, even when I thought we were done for good, I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know if love was enough anymore. And now," Elena placed their joined hands on her belly, where their daughter was doing her evening acrobatics. "Now I think love is just the beginning. We need respect, patience, compromise, communication, all the things we let slip away. But if we're both willing to work for it, if we're both committed to choosing each other every day, then maybe love is enough after all." David felt his eyes burning. "I choose you, Elena. Every day for the rest of my life, I choose you." "And I choose you," she said softly. "For better or worse, remember? We said those words once. I think it's time we really learned what they mean." They sat there as the evening deepened around them. Two people who'd almost lost everything, now holding tight to a second chance. Outside, the city lights began to glow. Inside, over pasta and plans and possibilities, David and Elena began the careful, courageous work of building a bridge back to each other. Their daughter kicked and tumbled, safe in her mother's womb, unaware that she'd already performed her first miracle, bringing her parents back together before she'd even taken her first breath. Sometimes the hardest endings become the most beautiful beginnings. Sometimes you have to almost lose everything to realize what you've had all along. And sometimes, just sometimes, love gets a second chance. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear about second chances, and subscribe to keep following stories of hope, healing, and the courage it takes to try again. Leave a comment below and tell me about a time you got a second chance at something important. Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling to take that brave first step. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to choose love.